Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are doing something that I honestly think is one of the most fascinating experiments we have ever run.
It's a little different for us.
It really is. Usually we take a huge concept, quantum mechanics or the fall of Rome or, I don't know, the history of coffee.
Yeah.
And we just drill down to the bedrock.
Right. We take the macro and we make it micro.
Exactly. But today, we are flipping that. We're inverting the telescope. We are taking one single person, a specific listener of this show, and we're using their genetic and historical data to tell a story that is, frankly, it's bigger than most empires we talk about.
It really is. We are looking at the lineage of a man named Carter Rand Bain. And Carter, if you're listening to this, I really hope you have a stiff drink or maybe a strong coffee in hand.
Yeah, pull up a chair, Carter. Because when we talk about genealogy, I think most people, and I'm including myself here, our eyes kind of glaze over. You picture a dusty library, right? Maybe some microfiche, a long list of names. John begat James, who begat William, who's a farmer in Ohio, Yeah. It's dry. It's just a ledger.
It's a spreadsheet of the dead. That's what it usually feels like. But what we have here with your lineage, Carter, this is not a spreadsheet. I've been buried in these archives for the last week, and I'm telling you, this is a screenplay.
Oh, totally.
This is Game of Thrones meets Band of Brothers with, I don't know, a little bit of Succession thrown in for good measure.
I was reading the prep notes for this last night, and I literally turned to my partner and said, there is no way this is all one family. It's just not possible. We have kings, we have assassinations, we have mead halls being burned to the ground with people inside.
Rebellions against the crown.
And then it all culminates in a coin flip in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that is honestly one of the most stressful things I have ever read.
It is an absolute miracle that Carter exists. Statistically, I mean, if you just run the numbers, the odds of Carter Rand Bain sitting in Idaho right now they're effectively zero.
So Carter, here's the mission for today. We're going to trace this unbroken thread of your DNA. We're going to track it from the mist and the mud of 11th century Scotland, specifically the royal courts of Moray. And we're going to follow it through the blood-soaked rebellions of the Highlands, across the Atlantic to the American frontier, through the Civil War, and finally land on the deck of a burning aircraft carrier in World War II.
It's a journey of almost exactly 1,000 years. And the craziest thing is, we aren't just guessing here. We're not telling a story. We have the science to back all of this up.
Okay, let's start right there. The anchor. Because, anyone can go on Ancestry.com and find some dubious link that says they're related to Charlemagne. But this is different. This is locked in by genetics.
Right. And we need to get just a little bit technical for a minute just to build the foundation for everything that follows. Carter sent us his FamilyTreeDNA results. And the headline here, the big one, is his paternal haplogroup. It is RFGC 11134.
Okay, let's unpack that. To me, and I'm sure to a lot of people listening, that looks like a Wi-Fi password. So what is a haplogroup, and why does that specific string of letters and numbers matter so much?
So think of your Y chromosome as a biological barcode. It gets passed from father to son, virtually unchanged for millennia. It doesn't mix with the mother's DNA. It's a pure, direct line back in time.
Okay.
However, every once in a very long while, a tiny random mutation happens, a little glitch in the copy. We call that a SMP, a single nucleotide polymorphism.
The typo in the code.
Exactly like a typo. And once that typo happens, every single man descended from that one person will carry that exact same typo. It acts like a molecular timestamp.
Got it.
Now, Carter's DNA falls under this massive umbrella group called R1b-U106. That's a huge group in Northern and Western Europe. Think Germanic tribes, Celtic people, the folks who really built the post-Roman world. But we can zoom in. We can get much, much closer than that.
How close are we talking?
We're talking about a specific marker, FGC 69619, that showed up around the year 300 AD, so late Roman Empire. But the specific sub-branch Carter has, that RFGC 113-4, that is the genetic fingerprint of the chiefs of Clan Mackay and the ancient nobility of Moray.
So you're saying when we use the phrase unbroken line, we're not just relying on some crumbly old church records that might have gotten burned up.
No, not at all. There are groups like the Clan Mackay DNA Project and the Bain DNA Project who have triangulated all of this. We have testers today who have perfect paper trails going all the way back to the clan chiefs, and their DNA matches Carter's perfectly. There are no what we call non-paternity events.
Which is the polite scientific way of saying the milkman wasn't involved.
Right. Exactly. No secret adoptions, no affairs that broke that paternal chain. It is a biological straight line, father to son, for over 1,000 years. The blood in Carter's veins right now is carrying the same Y chromosome that was walking around the Scottish Highlands in the Dark Ages.
That's a really heavy concept. You're basically carrying a biological archive around inside your own body.
You really are. So now that we've established that this connection is absolutely real, let's go to the source. Let's set the scene. We are not in Idaho anymore. We are in Scotland, but not the Scotland of, golf courses and whiskey tours.
We're talking about Alba.
Alba. The 10th and 11th centuries, it is wet, it is cold, and it is unbelievably violent. The borders aren't drawn yet. You have Vikings constantly raiding the coasts. You have the English pushing up from the south. And right in the middle, you have the High Kings of Scots trying to hold it all together with, nothing but iron and willpower.
And this is where Carter's story begins, with his 31st great-grandfather?
That's the one, Malcolm I, King of Scots.
Yes.
He reigned from 943 to 944 AD.
Now, being king in the year 943, I feel like we need to be really clear about what that actually means. This is not sitting on a velvet chair and waving at crowds, is it?
Oh, God, no. It was basically a death sentence. Being King of Scots meant you were the warlord-in-chief. There was no standing army. There were no generals you could send out. If there was a threat, you grabbed your sword, you got your men, and you went.
So he's on the front lines.
Always. Malcolm I spent his entire reign just playing whack-a-mole with Vikings. He was allied with the Kings of Wessex down in England, and they were trying to drive out this guy named Eric Bloodaxe.
Eric Bloodaxe? That sounds like a villain from a fantasy novel. I mean, come on.
He was a very real and a very, very dangerous King of York. It was just a brutal time. And true to form, Malcolm I didn't retire to a country estate. He was killed in battle.
Of course he was.
And this sets up a dynamic that Carter really needs to understand to get his family history. It's a system called tanistry.
Right. I've heard this term. This is how the Scots handled succession. And it wasn't just the oldest son gets the crown.
Exactly. Primogeniture, where the eldest son inherits everything, that was a Norman idea that came to Britain later. The Scots, the Celts, they didn't do that yet. Under tanistry, the crown went to the fittest male in the entire royal family. It could be a brother, a cousin, a nephew.
The idea being you always want a strong adult warrior on the throne, not a child.
That was the theory. And it sounds pretty smart and democratic on paper, but in practice...
In practice, it meant every single male relative you had was a mortal threat.
A mortal threat, yes. If your cousin thought he was stronger or more popular with the other clans than you, he was actively incentivized to kill you and take the throne. It turned the royal family into an absolute pit of vipers.
So your ancestors, Carter, were constantly looking over their shoulders?
Constantly. Just look at the timeline we have here. Malcolm I killed in battle. His son, Dub, who was called the Black, Carter's 30th great-grandfather, he's assassinated or killed in the Civil War. His son, Kenneth III, the Brown, killed in battle at a place called Monziverd. And by who?
Let me guess. A relative.
By his own cousin, Malcolm II.
It's just a meat grinder. Generation after generation of violence.
It is. And that violence, that brutality, leads us directly to the most famous name in the entire Bain family tree. We have to talk about her. Carter's 27th great-grandmother.
Gruch.
Gruch Ingenboit. But history knows her by her married name, Lady Macbeth.
Wait, hold on. The Lady Macbeth? As in, out damn spot, that Lady Macbeth.
The one and only.
Okay, my mind is blown. Because when I hear Lady Macbeth, I think of Shakespeare. I think of this, this ghost-like woman walking down a hallway, rubbing her hands, scheming, pushing her husband to murder. I think of a monster.
And that is the great tragedy of Shakespeare's play. He wrote an absolute masterpiece, don't get me wrong, but it was a complete and total hatchet job on a real historical figure.
What?
He wrote it to please his patron, King James I of England, who is also James VI of Scotland. And James traced his own lineage back to the people who overthrew Macbeth. So Shakespeare made Macbeth and his wife into these irredeemable villains. The real Gruch. She wasn't a villain. She was a survivor of unimaginable trauma.
Okay, let's set the record straight for Carter. Who was his grandmother, really?
To understand Gruch, you have to look at the year 1032 AD. She's a young woman. She is of royal blood. She's the granddaughter of that Kenneth III who was murdered by his cousin, and she's married to a very powerful man named Gilles Comgain.
That is a mouthful of a name.
It is. He was the Mormaer of Moray. Now, Mormaer translates to something like great steward, but in reality, you should think of him as an independent king of the north. Moray was almost its own country. They did not like taking orders from the south.
So Gruch is essentially the queen of the north.
She is. And one night she's in a hall at Burghead. It's a major fortification on the coast. It's a huge wooden great hall, thatched roof. big fire pit in the center. She's in there with her husband and 50 of his best men, his war band.
And the King of Scots, at the time Malcolm II, decides he's finally had enough of these northern rivals.
Malcolm II, who, you have to remember, had already killed Gruch's grandfather, he marches north. But he doesn't challenge them to an open battle. He surrounds the hall in the middle of the night, he bars the doors, and he sets it on fire.
He burns them alive.
It was an atrocity, even for the time. Siragum Gain and 50 of the best warriors in the north are trapped inside. The wood catches, the smoke fills the room. They just burn to death, and somehow Gruch escapes.
How? How did she get out of that?
We don't know the exact specifics. The chronicles are silent on it. Maybe she was in a separate chamber, a women's house nearby. Maybe she was smuggled out by a loyal guard through a back way. But she runs out into the darkness. And here is the absolute key detail for Carter's entire existence.
Okay.
She isn't alone. She's either carrying a young child or she's pregnant.
And that child is Luloch?
Luloch, Carter's 26th great-grandfather.
Just try to picture that for a second.
Yeah.
The sensory overload, the smell of the smoke, the sound of your husband and his men screaming inside a burning building, the heat, the king's soldiers hunting for you in the dark, and you are running for your life, clutching the last heir of your line.
That is the DNA that Carter has. That is the survival instinct. She didn't crumble. She didn't go hide in a nunnery. She did something incredibly shrewd. She went to the one man who could protect her. Macbeth, who was also her cousin, and who also had a legitimate claim to the throne. It was a brilliant, pragmatic political move. She marries Macbeth. He adopts Luloch as his stepson. And together, their combined claims are strong enough to go to war against the king's faction.
And they win.
They win. Macbeth kills the reigning king, Duncan, in battle, not in his sleep in a castle like the play says, and he takes the throne. And again, contrary to Shakespeare, he and Gruch ruled Scotland for 17 years, and it was actually a time of peace and prosperity.
So they were good rulers.
They were excellent rulers. They were so secure that they went on a pilgrimage to Rome. They were famously generous to the church. But the old dynasty, the Malcolm faction, specifically the son of the king they'd killed, was always waiting in England, plotting a comeback.
This would be Malcolm III, the Avenger.
Exactly. He comes back in 1057 with English support. Macbeth is killed in battle, and suddenly Luloch, that boy Gruch saved from the fire all those years ago, is the King of Scots.
He's called Luloch the Simple.
An incredibly unfortunate nickname.
Yeah, history can be cruel with the nicknames. Does simple mean he was, dim-witted or just bad at politics?
Most historians think it meant something more like guileless or the unfortunate. He was honest. He seems to have lacked the deep, paranoid ruthlessness you needed to survive as a king in the 11th century. He wasn't a born killer, and because of that, his reign lasted only a few months.
Oh, wow. How did it end?
Ambush. Malcolm III caught him at a place called Essey in Strathbogie in 1058. Luloch is killed, and with him, the direct male line of the ancient House of Elpin is shattered.
So the king is dead. Macbeth is dead. Luloch is dead. The family is completely out of power. This feels like the end of the line.
It should have been. It absolutely should have been the end. The new regime wanted to wipe them out, root and stem. But Luloch had a daughter.
Do you know her name?
It's one of the great frustrating gaps in the Scottish records. She's nameless in the chronicles, but she is the single most important pivot point in this entire story. Without her, Carter Bain is not here.
So how does she survive the purge?
She is taken likely by force, or perhaps as part of a forced political marriage to pacify the region by a man named Aed, or in some records, Heth.
And Heth is not a Scot.
Not purely, he's a Jarl. He's a mix of the old Pictish nobility from the north and Norse Viking blood.
So we are literally injecting Viking DNA directly into the royal Scottish bloodline here.
That is the synthesis. You take the ancient royal Celtic claim of Gruch and Luloch, and you mix it with the seafaring, axe-wielding aggression of the Vikings. And that union creates a new dynasty, a new problem for the throne.
The Macbeths.
The Macbeths, the sons of Heth. And for the next 100 years, they aren't kings. They are the rebels. They are the insurgents of the north.
And in their minds, they are the rightful kings.
And by the old laws of tanistry, they had a very strong case. They looked at the southern kings in Dunfermline, who are starting to speak French, invite Norman knights in and act like English lords, and they said, no, we are the true Scots. We represent the old way.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Macbeth rebels, fighting for the north. Specifically, Carter's 24th great-grandfather, a man named Malcolm Macbeth, the first Earl of Ross.
This man was a major problem for the crown, a very serious problem. He spent his entire life fighting, but the one moment that really defines him and defines the sheer brutality of this lineage is the Battle of Stracathro in the year 1130.
Okay, paint the picture for us. What does 12th century warfare look like in the Highlands? Because I think a lot of people just picture Braveheart, but it's probably more nuanced than that.
It's nasty. On one side, you have the royal army under King David I. And these guys are modern for the time. They've adopted Norman military technology. They have chainmail suits, heavy war horses, lances, a corps of professional knights. They are a machine.
And on the other side, the rebels.
Maqueths, the men of Moray, maybe 5,000 Highlanders. They don't have heavy cavalry. They're light infantry. They have round shields, maybe some leather armor, and long hafted axes. And they rely on one tactic: the Highland charge.
Just a human wave attack.
Is screaming and running downhill as fast as you can to try and break the enemy line with pure shock and terror.
So it's sheer bravery versus military technology.
And at Stracathro, technology won. The Highlanders charged down these muddy slopes, but the Norman cavalry just smashed right into them. It was a complete slaughter. Malcolm Maqueth's cousin, Angus, who was the Mormacow of Moray at the time, was killed right in front of him.
But Malcolm himself survives.
He escapes the field, but he's hunted down. And this is where you see that resilience again. They capture him, but they don't execute him. He's too valuable, too much of a symbol to the Northerners. So they throw him in Roxburgh Castle.
For how long?
23 years.
23?
23 years. Just try to imagine that. Yeah. You go in as a young, powerful warrior, the leader of a rebellion. You come out an old man.
In a dungeon.
A medieval dungeon, damp stone walls, sleeping on straw. Rats. Darkness. He sat in a cell for over 2 decades, keeping that claim alive just by breathing.
That requires a level of mental fortitude I just can't even comprehend. Most people would break after a year, let alone 23.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the craziest part is he was eventually released. The king's grandson needed to make peace in the north, so she let Malcolm out and even granted him the earldom of Ross to buy his loyalty. He actually died a free man.
But the fire of rebellion didn't die with him. His son kept it going.
His son, Kenneth Maqueth, the unrepentant rebel. He saw his father's compromise as weakness. He launched another invasion in 1215.
And this one. This one didn't end with the negotiated release in an earldom.
No, this was the end of the McCaves as a major political power.
Yeah.
The ambush at the Spey. Kenneth was caught, and the new king wasn't taking any more prisoners.
What did he do?
They cut off his head.
Game over.
Piped his head and presented it to the king as a trophy. They stripped the family of all their lands in Moray and Ross. They were declared outlaws, hunted.
So you're landless, your leader is dead, and the king's men are hunting you. What do? Where do you go?
You run. You go to the one place where the king's heavy cavalry can't follow. You go to the absolute ends of the earth. The far, far north, what they call the Rough Bounds. It's a moonscape of mountains, bogs, and desolate valleys. And you change your name?
This is Section 3, The Wolf in the Valley, The Rise of Clan Mackay.
Exactly. The name Maqueth was tainted. It was a target on your back. So the survivors who fled to Strathnavar, they rebranded. They started to emphasize their descent from their ancestor Aid, which in Gaelic is a weed. They became Macaid.
Mackay.
Clan Mackay.
So Carter, when you see the name Mackay on a map or a whiskey bottle, you have to realize that's just the Witness Protection Program version of your original family name, Maqueth.
That's a great way to put it, yes. It was a name they took for survival. And life in Strathnavar was unbelievably grim. We are not talking about castles with tapestries and wine cellars anymore. We're talking about peel towers.
Explain what a peel tower is.
It's a vertical fortress. A simple stone tower, maybe 3 or 4 stories high. No windows on the ground floor, just a single heavy door. You'd pull the ladder up at night to get to the living quarters.
And you lived with your livestock.
You slept with your cattle on the ground floor so they wouldn't get stolen by raiding parties. You and your family lived on the floor above them.
That sounds aromatic.
It was a hard, hard life. They herded black cattle, and they were in a constant state of low-grade war with their powerful neighbors, the Earls of Sutherland.
So it's like they just couldn't catch a break?
Yeah.
They traded a king who wanted them dead for an earl who wanted them dead.
It was a brutal, violent existence. And this feud with the Sutherlands leads to another one of these red wedding moments in your family history. The Dingwall Castle Parley in 1370.
Tell us about Mackay, the 4th chief of the clan.
Mackay decides to try and make peace. He goes to Dingwall Castle to negotiate with the Earl of Sutherland. This is supposed to be a parley under flag of truce. This is sacred in Highland culture. You have guest right. You do not harm someone you've broken bread with.
But the Sutherlands didn't really care about the rules.
No. In the middle of the night, or perhaps mid-negotiation, the sources vary on the timing. Nicholas Sutherland pulls a dagger. He murders Imacai and his son right there in the castle.
The theme of betrayal just runs so deep in this family history.
And it triggered a massive violent reaction. Ai's other son, Donald, the new 5th chief, went on a rampage. The Mackay started torching towns, hanging rivals, burning cathedrals. It was just total war.
And it's out of this chaos, this constant cycle of violence, that we finally get to the name on Carter's driver's license. We get to the birth of Bain.
Yes. This is a crucial turning point. This is Section 4, the birth of Bain. And it happens around the year 1433 at a place called the Battle of Drumnachub.
Drumnachub. What happened there?
This wasn't a battle against the Sutherlands or the king. This was a civil war within Clan Mackay, a bitter succession crisis. You had the Neil Morgan faction fighting the Angus Dew faction for control of the clan. It was fought on a hill called Carn Fudda, and it was intimate, horrible, violence cousins killing cousins with claymores and dirks.
And in the middle of this absolute slaughter is Carter's 15th great-grandfather.
John Mackay. But he had a nickname, Ian Bean. In Gaelic, Bean or Ban means fair-haired.
So he was probably a blonde guy or light-haired, standing out in the middle of the melee.
Exactly. Something that distinguished him from the Black Mackays or the Red Mackays, which were other branches. He survives this horrific battle, but something inside him clearly shifted.
What happened?
He was just done. He saw the slaughter, this endless cycle of vengeance, the deep poverty of life in Strathnaver, and he made a choice. He dropped the Mackay name, he kept his nickname Bain, and he left the Highlands for good.
He just walked away from the war.
He walked away from the whole life, and he moved to Dingwall, the very place where his ancestor had been murdered. But he didn't go as a warrior. He went as a civilian.
This is a huge sociological shift. I mean, we've been in Game of Thrones for centuries, and now we're moving into, what, Wall Street?
It's pretty close. They went from warriors to burghers to merchants. John Bain's son, Alexander Bain, he added the Y and E to make it sound a bit more sophisticated, became a very wealthy merchant and a respected citizen in Dingwall.
How does a family of warriors make that transition? That seems like a really steep learning curve. From axes to accounting.
It is. But you have to remember, these were clearly smart, adaptable people. It's the same survival instinct, just applied differently. They traded their axes for velvet and spices. Alexander built in shipping, textiles, the spice markets. He understood that the real power in a changing Scotland was shifting from the sword to the coin.
They didn't just join the establishment, they became the establishment.
They absolutely did. They eventually bought Tulloch Castle, just outside Dingwall. They became the Bains of Tulloch, a respected line of landed gentry. By 1680, you have Sir Donald Bain being knighted. He's wearing a powdered wig and lace cuffs and sitting in the Scottish Parliament. It is a world away from his ancestors rotting in a dungeon or sleeping above their cows.
It's just amazing how adaptable this line is. They survive fire, they survive defeat, they survive civil war, and they reinvent themselves.
But the reinvention wasn't over. By the mid-1700s, Scotland was changing again. The Act of Union had happened. The Highland clearances were beginning. The old economy was shifting. And for a younger son of a gentry family, the opportunities were starting to dry up.
Time to move again.
The American chapter begins. Carter's 6th great-grandfather, John Bain, who was born in 1731, decides to leave Scotland and cross the Atlantic.
To colonial Virginia.
He arrives sometime around the 1750s, and the name shifts again. They drop the Y and the E. It becomes Bain, B-A-I-N. Simple, practical, American.
And his son, John Bain II, is born in what is now West Virginia in 1754. So he's growing up right on the edge of the frontier.
Absolutely. Fighting bears, clearing forests, dealing with raids, living that rough-and-tumble pioneer life. But I want to zoom in on one specific character from this period who I think really embodies that old Macketh warrior spirit. William Norris Bain.
This is Carter's 4th great-grandfather.
He was born in 1847 in Dade County, Missouri. Now, you have to think about the geography and the timing here. Missouri, the 1850s and early 1860s.
The Civil War, bleeding Kansas.
But not the Civil War of big, organized armies and battles like Gettysburg. Missouri was a complete nightmare. It was a border state. You had neighbors killing neighbors. It was a war of guerrilla bands. Bushwhackers versus Jayhawkers.
Bushwhackers were the pro-Confederate guerrillas, right?
Yes. Men like Bloody Bill Anderson and William Quantrill. They would ride into a town, burn the houses of Union sympathizers, and execute men in the street. It was pure terror warfare.
And William is just a boy when this all kicks off.
He's 14 years old when the war starts. Think about a 14-year-old today, playing video games, going to 8th grade. William Norris Bain, he runs away from home.
He runs to the war.
He runs to the war. He joins the Union cavalry. At 14 or 15, he had to lie about his age to get in. And he wasn't peeling potatoes in the rear somewhere. He was an active cavalryman riding in the Missouri-Kansas theater. This was the most brutal, fast-paced guerrilla warfare you can imagine. Saber charges, long patrols in the rain, hunting down those very raiders.
I can just see him, this teenager, miles from home, riding through the mud with a saber and a carbine, fighting for the Union. It's that same rebel spirit from Stracathro. It's just in a different uniform.
It absolutely is. That survival instinct is just incredible. He managed to survive the entire war, which was statistically very unlikely for a cavalryman in that chaotic theater. And after it was all over, he moved west.
To Kansas.
He homesteaded in a place called Colony, Kansas. He built a farm from scratch. He raised a family. He became a pillar of his community.
And then the line moves one last time to Idaho.
That's right. Benjamin and Ezra Bain moved the family to Idaho, working the land, farming. But this brings us to the absolute climax of this 1,000-year story, the single moment where all of it, all that survival, hangs by a single thread.
We have to talk about Floyd Bain.
Carter's great-grandfather, World War II.
The Pacific Theater.
Floyd is serving in the U.S. Navy on the USS Bunker Hill. It's an Essex-class aircraft carrier, a massive floating city, an airfield at sea, and the year is 1945. They are part of the fleet supporting the invasion of Okinawa.
This was hell on earth for the Navy.
Yeah.
The Japanese military was desperate. They were throwing everything they had at the American fleet, especially kamikazes, attacks, suicide planes loaded with explosives.
And the Bunker Hill, as a carrier, was a prime target. Floyd's battle station was in the flight control tower. It's that structure high up on the island of the ship. You have a great view, but you are incredibly exposed.
Okay, now, you have to tell us the story of the coin flip. Because when I read this in the notes, I had to put the paper down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It is the kind of detail you just can't make up. The men in the control tower had a little ritual. It was a long, stressful watch. When they needed a coffee run, they wouldn't just volunteer. They would flip a coin to see who had to make the dangerous trek across the open flight deck to the mess hall to get the coffee pot.
Just a simple coffee run.
Just a coffee run. On this specific morning, May 11th, 1945, the coin goes up in the air. Floyd calls it.
It loses.
He loses the coin toss.
He loses. So he probably grumbles a bit, grabs the thermos and climbs down the ladder. He leaves the tower. He starts walking across the flight deck towards the nest.
And while he is walking across that deck, maybe he's only 50 yards away, 2 kamikazes come screaming out of the clouds. The first one hits the flight deck. The second, a Japanese Zero carrying a 550-pound bomb, smashes directly into the base of the control tower.
Oh, my God.
It obliterated it. The explosion and the fire it vaporized the tower. Everyone inside, all the men Floyd had been standing and joking with just 2 minutes earlier, were killed instantly.
If he had won that coin toss.
If the coin had landed heads instead of tails, Floyd stays at his post. Floyd dies. His son Rand is never born. Curtis is never born. And Carter Bain of Idaho never, ever exists.
That is absolutely chilling. 1,000 years of history comes down to that.
It's the ultimate butterfly effect. But it's not a butterfly. It's a nickel flipping in the air.
We've talked about Grooch escaping a burning hall. We've talked about Malcolm McKeth surviving a dungeon for 2 decades. You've talked about John Bain walking away from a Klan massacre.
Yeah.
But the closest call of them all was a coin flip on a boat in the Pacific.
It really makes you think about luck and fate and chance, doesn't it? Floyd survived. He came home to Idaho. He went back to farming. He lived a quiet life after all the noise of the war.
And the line continued. Floyd had Rand, Rand had Curtis, and Curtis had Carter.
And now Carter has Oliver.
The newest generation.
Oliver Bain. He is the heir to all of this. He carries it all.
It's just incredible. Let's just try to recap the whole journey for Carter so we can see the full arc laid out.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about the evolution of the name itself. You start as McKeth, the son of the Norse Pictish Jarl. Then you become Mackay, the wolf of the north. Then you're Bain, the fair-haired survivor who walks away. Then you're Bain, the sophisticated merchant and knight. And finally, you circle back to Bain, the American pioneer.
And the geography is just as epic. You start in the ancient kingdom of Moray and Ross. Then you're exiled to the wilderness of Strathnever. Then you move to the city, to Dingwall, then across an ocean to Virginia, west to the plains of Kansas, and finally you put down roots in the mountains of Idaho.
And the spirit, the theme, it has always been about one thing: adaptation. When the hall burned, they married the rival. When the battle was lost, they moved north and changed their name. When the clan feud got too bloody, they became merchants. And when the coin was flipped, they went for coffee.
It is a masterclass in survival.
And we have to say it one more time. The DNA confirms it. That RFCC 1011 through 24 marker is the proof. There are no breaks in the chain. It's a direct physical link back to all of it.
So Carter, as we wrap this deep dive up, I want to leave you with a final thought.
When you look at your son, Oliver, you have to realize that you aren't just raising a kid in Idaho. You are raising the next chapter in a story that began in the House of Alpin. He carries the literal DNA of kings, of rebels, of knights, and of a very, very lucky sailor who beat the odds on the USS Bunker Hill.
That is one hell of a legacy to carry.
It is, and it's all yours.
Carter, thank you for letting us take this deep dive into your blood, into your story. It has been an absolute privilege.
Truly epic. Thank you.
And to everyone else listening, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next